Welcome to Learning Life Skills Together. This is our weekly community Zoom meeting where our guests help us to go deeper into the 4 life skills and open up a huge array of chances to practice them. Hello, everyone. This is Learning Life Skills Together weekly Zoom meeting number 87 with Kevin Finan. And I'm really happy to have captured Kevin for a moment in his rather fast-moving life. Kevin is an elementary teacher and a certified mindfulness teacher, and also has kids at home, and we'll probably get into that as we go. And because Kevin teaches mindfulness, I thought to ask him to guide us in our practice, which is how we always start these things.
All right. Well, thank you for having me today. And just as a preface, I'll talk about relaxation as I guide this practice, but a huge caveat, mindfulness does not mean relaxation. I think that's always important to note. So we can bring awareness to whether we're relaxed or not, but mindfulness is just being simply aware of whatever is arising in the moment and attempting to limit that judgment on whatever your experience is whatever's coming up in your experience. So just beginning, if you're comfortable with it while you're listening, if you're comfortable and in a place where you can close your eyes, feel free. Otherwise, maybe directing your gaze towards the floor. And then allowing yourself to come into contact with the supports beneath you. So perhaps bringing your attention into the feet and allowing your awareness to simply travel through the legs, feeling the chair beneath you into the back, maybe feeling the chair behind you, and then allowing yourself to have your spine coming up as straight as you can while not bringing a lot of tension, sort of a relaxed awareness through the spine, and then into the area of the face. And if possible, if there's any tension in the face or in the shoulders, on an exhale, maybe allowing all of that to just melt away as much as it can. And then when you're ready, perhaps allowing your awareness to shift into towards the breath. So becoming aware of the breath wherever it is most vivid for you. So this could be in the nose, maybe in the chest or in the belly. And just allowing yourself to place your awareness on the flow of the breath entering and exiting the body. And there's no need to force the breath to be any which way, just allowing the breath to breathe itself as it has been long before we brought our awareness to the breath. Often, when working with children and helping them to practice the skill of awareness, they can be directed to feeling their breath, especially with communication and listening. So, if you're wondering how you could kind of offer this to a child, we know that when we're more relaxed, listening is more available to us. So perhaps just breathing in for maybe a count of 3, and then exhaling for a count of 6. You kind of maybe go through that a couple times on your own at your own pace. And as you're inhaling and exhaling, particularly on the exhale, maybe allowing yourself to feel the body softening. it's often easy for children to realize that tension or tightness is experienced on the inhale. So when you can direct their attention to the softening on the exhale, this allows them to begin to maybe move towards relaxation. And it's not guaranteed, but we may not feel totally relaxed, but we might be able to move towards relaxation just simply by exhaling a little bit longer than we're inhaling and by consciously softening regions of the body, particularly maybe in the shoulders, maybe in the face by relaxing the jaw, just simply letting the air out of our body. That might bring a sense of relaxation that is accessible to children or child that you are working with or living with. So maybe just taking in one more count of three and exhaling on a count of six. And in your time, perhaps beginning to shift or move if your eyes are closed, opening them and coming back to this larger space that you're currently in.
Ah, well, thank you for that, Kevin.
You
And
are most certainly welcome.
since I'm the only person who can speak to how this was for me, for anyone. I'm gonna say that the thing that I sort of noticed the most was that softening that you were talking about, that sort of on the out breath, kind of a almost a sinking into my chair, my shoulders dropping down a little more. And so when when you were talking about pointing that out to the children, that really made sense to me because it can be kind of a big thing once you get your attention there. Once you become aware of, oh, this does that. It's a little ride.
Yeah.
Not a roller
Yeah.
coaster, not a roller
And
coaster, but
now,
hey.
but I think with kids, and so I do use this with elementary students, and I think one, do they even know what they don't know how to pay attention. No one's ever, the people yell at them to pay attention, but what does that mean?
Right.
Two, do they know what relaxed means? Like we take for granted. I taught first grade for a long time, and I once said, imagine you inherit 20 people who are really sweet, but have no idea how to do anything that everyone else on the planet knows how to do. It's like just like there's things that we take for granted that they're learning. And so if we can help cue them into their body, like your body's a way to relax. If your body's relaxed, then often our awareness becomes relaxed. So in my experience and in my experience working with students. So we want our students and we want our kids to be energetic and funny and silly. That this is joyous. Those are some of my favorite aspects
Yeah.
of life. But when it's time to listen, that kind of energy and the energy required for listening don't always align. So teaching them that relaxation or just that technique, you can easily in 30 seconds go from heightened energy to a more relaxed energy.
Yeah. And in our life skills program right now, what we've been talking about and the final module, the last module that's going up is the one on communication. And so listening is a big part of communication. So I was intrigued by you're talking about relaxation and listening and how the kids need to be cued in to that. And
Yeah, and yeah, sorry, I cut you off.
oh no, go ahead. I if you have something to say there,
Yeah,
I'm
no,
all
no,
ears, as we say. Yeah.
no. I think too. Well, of course, I lost my train of thought, but I think with communication, often the adult, it's the communication because the adult is driving that ship, or ideally, is driving the ship. We have our agenda, at least in my experience. And so, as a teacher or as a parent, especially as a teacher or parent under a time crunch, I have my agenda And communicating with children sometimes is a challenge. So if we can relax ourselves, one, the child is attuning to us, so they will naturally relax. And then if we can actually relax ourselves enough to listen to them instead of just trying to steamroll through, I find it's going to be more productive. The times when I am rushing and have an agenda and want to do something quickly are the times when I'm more stressed and there's way more tension in the conversation. So it's really, this is, I don't know if in the 86 prior podcast, I'm assuming it may have been covered, but with the children and what I said before, tuning to us, like when I'm all revved up, they're gonna have a hard time listening simply because of my energy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's what we've been discussing is that, there is this capacity for co-regulation. The kids get, that relaxation that you're talking about from us. They don't generally generate it themselves, in my experience.
The lucky few, the lucky
Yeah,
few.
exactly. So, but as they go, as they do, then we do too.
Sure.
It's like we can start it, but then it turns into a thing that comes back and forth, and we get a benefit from it just that way too. You know.
I often will, a few times a week, and I wish it was more than that, but I comment to groups of students how like peaceful it is and how much I appreciate when they are settling in. And it doesn't last long all the time. In fact, typically the minute that I praise them for that ease, it's gone. But
Right.
it's there, and for students, especially young students, to begin to um, understand that they have a capacity for regulation and that they have something tangible like softening the body. I do think that's a skill that they can carry with them. And I try to point out the times when, hey, like what's going on with your body right now, what's going on with your energy, and will say, like what does listening look like? What does it sound like? And the most important for me is what does listening feel like? And then that cues them into the relax. And the students will I'll give them hand gestures to kind of tie something physical to the breath. So they may just raise their hands up and then have their fingers kind of wiggling, falling down as like a snow globe, or they'll take their index finger, their right hand, and trace the fingers on their left hand, inhaling as their fingers going up and exhaling as it's going down. So some people call that the roller coaster. I call it 5 and 1. But cueing them to that, even now, I say, what does listening feel like? It's crazy. Like 4 or 5 students will immediately start moving their hands around, and it's very clear they're actually like cued into using the breath in a way just to help regulate them. So, um,
Yeah,
it,
interesting. Yeah. So, let's see. So, listening, really important, getting things started. With that listening. And so maybe our willingness to listen and our settling in lets them settle in. And then what are we hearing is kind of the next thing that's happening. What are we hearing coming from the kids? And right now, what we've been talking about a lot in the communications module here is this idea of validating what's going on with the kids when they tell us. And it doesn't necessarily make sense to us at the start. And I'm wondering about your experiences with that and how you get to that point where you can say, I get where you're coming from. I know what you mean. Yeah, I get it. You're making complete sense for what's happening with you.
in my experience as a teacher and a parent, I can't always make sense of what they're saying. So that
Yeah.
there's that caveat. But I will say that um, when the again, the awareness of how I am is pivotal. And when my child or my student comes to me in with heightened emotions, personally, my emotions heighten immediately. So if I can settle myself down, I know that that aids them. I also know, and I know you mentioned before we went live that you've talked about the handy model of the brain and the different regions of the brain that might light up when we are under stress. So when students are in those moments where the amygdala, which is really where the stress response is sort of happening in the brain, when we get when we're there, when the child's fired up in that way, if we can do something to kind of slow them down. So by allowing them to name their emotions, so we say like name it to tame it, which again in our little pre-conversation, this is something that the listeners may be familiar with. And I mentioned, drawing a picture is something that I've used with my own children and with students when their emotions are heightened. That those moments are the hardest, simply because uh, I'm trying to listen while regulating my own emotions, and it's
Mm.
that's easier to do with students than with my own children who may have made a mistake that then my emotions really are charged up. So with my own children, sometimes it's just listening to them, just trying to slow things down, giving them a hug, even if I'm angry. Sometimes
Mm.
that hug might invite the same softening that I spoke of while guiding the meditation. So any of that may slow us down. But I know
Yeah.
that these things, the key would be, and again, like drawing a picture or writing in a journal or something, it will activate a different region of the brain, which might downregulate the stress response in the brain. And as we come down, we may be able to the child especially may be able to communicate more effectively, especially if there's a lot of screaming, a lot of crying and whatnot. Those are the hardest ways to communicate.
Yeah,
Um,
and the thing that you just said about, sometimes you just give them a hug.
yeah.
Because sometimes it isn't about thinking and it isn't about talking. It's about what needs to happen right now. You know,
Mhm.
what's going to be helpful, what's going to be comforting, and quite often a hug is what's necessary. I know I feel that way sometimes myself.
Sure, sure, sure. I
Let's
think
not talk
too,
about
yeah.
it.
Like in my personally, I feel like if I direct my, energy and my my desire towards solving a problem in life, I feel like often I can do well to solve a problem. But when one of my kids is having a problem, directing that energy at the problem doesn't necessarily always solve their problem. And thinking it through and talking about it can sometimes have them spiral more.
Yeah,
So, so I think that even though I have the best of intentions and I want to solve their problems, sometimes I might cause them and myself more stress because we stay in that heightened experience longer just
yeah,
by trying to talk about it, talk about it, talk about it. So
yeah,
sometimes the communication is to not communicate in the verbal sense and to just be there. I think that just being there is probably not, it is a strategy and it is meaningful to kids. They want to know that in their time of crisis, someone will be there because you can't always solve problems.
yeah, yeah. And that translates all across the age groups. I mean, sometimes it's not a talking thing. Sometimes it's just be here, be with me.
Hmm.
The deal. Yeah, I need to know that somebody's here.
Sure.
Yeah, and you're
The little baby in us just wants to be held, you know.
yeah, that's it. That's it. Uh, wow. So let's see. So communication, listening, getting ourselves attuned, and you know, then we can maybe start to have the conversation or have a conversation. But also, as you're saying, maybe there needs to be a pause, and maybe there even needs to be, okay, we're settling down a little bit. Let's put a gap in here and come
Sure.
to this later. I mean, again, your experience in that would be helpful for all of us.
Well, and it's tricky because if you take that gap and it might be, we can teach our kids that sometimes like a distraction isn't the worst thing. So maybe it's okay to watch something every once in a while. If every time we're stressed, all we do is watch something, that's where it might be problematic. And then how to venture back into a conversation, is a whole other thing. So whatever the gap is, if it's drawing and art and creating, which is skillful and isn't it could be a healthy distraction, or if you're going outside, getting some fresh air, if you're in nature, whatever it is. I know that that's a part of the learning life skills together.
Yeah, totally.
Um, so those could be those good or high quality pauses that they might offer you something. They might not. It's none of this is guaranteed, everyone's an individual.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but I,
I hope no one who's listening thinks there's
yeah,
guarantees involved.
yeah.
Yeah.
But what I find, whether the gap is 3 minutes or longer, and sometimes maybe we go to bed because it's late and we want to come back to it the next day.
Yeah.
Um, I think that what I try to do, and I'm not always successful with it, but what I try to do with students and my own kids is instead of telling them what I think all the time, I try to ask them some questions. This is what happened. Did you think that this choice was helpful? Often it's, with primary students, there's like the conversations where you come back to them when things have settled down. Maybe there's some sort of confrontation between two students or a misunderstanding, or he said I did this, or he hit me, or whatever. And it's, slowing down and having them think through it went from a cooler place. But from asking them questions and leading them to kind of come to an
Mm,
understanding from their perspective, as opposed to me just telling them this was wrong and you should have done this.
mm,
So, so
yeah.
not always the easiest thing to do with your own kids because sometimes you're very much invested on a different
Yeah.
level.
Yeah.
So, but again, I do try to empower them to think and respond as opposed to just get a lecture because I think they're at least
Yeah.
engaging and having to process the language.
Yeah, absolutely. So, um, let's see. That sort what came up for me in that was how is it the same and different for kids of varying ages? I mean, you were talking about working with the first graders with the littles.
Sure, sure, yeah.
And,
Uh,
and that's maybe a different thing than working with your daughter who's kind of in that moving into that teen kind of
sure.
head,
Um, I think that the younger kids are more apt to fall in line, in my experience. Um, but again, there's individuals that will dig in, and there may be a student with, oppositional defiant disorder who it doesn't matter how calm or patient you are. There are students with disabilities that it may present differently. A teenage daughter is you you get
I know.
you I sometimes will try to be creative in how I communicate. But I mean, I'm not always perfect, and um there is a difference in how they communicate, but at the same time, I feel like if you treat them now, obviously a toddler is much different, but once students become school aged, if you allow them to be engaged and if the communication is two ways, and if it's in a place where we've settled some, um, I think that you're going to have more success. Sometimes with teenagers and your own children, um, they may be, they tire of us and we have our trends and the things, and they may not want to hear it, and the space may not be enough. So, you have to I think sometimes you just have to be creative and sometimes with my own kids, you just have to pick your battles. Is this thing that I want to discuss that I feel is a big
Hmm.
deal? Is it that big of a deal?
Yeah, yeah. Is this about me or is this about
Sure.
the
I
future well-being of my child? Yeah.
Yeah, I once said I ran a group around mindfulness and parenting, and I introduced myself, and I said I'm Kevin, and I yell at my kids sometimes. I don't like it. I don't like when that happens, but
Yeah.
I'm a human.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's what's going on. And so some of this is about judgment and trying to find that space of non-judgment, that we need if we're going to be able to understand and validate our kids' emotions in the
Sure.
situation.
And validate our own emotions. Like when be it you have to get to work or you have something where other people are dependent on you and you need to make a living, and then your child is doing something that is prohibiting you from doing that the way that you would like to. Like, it's pretty normal for anger to arise in that scenario.
Yeah.
So validating your own experience and like who wouldn't be angry right now? Who wouldn't find this hard? Who wouldn't be frustrated? So, knowing your own feelings, again, naming it to tame it, you can start to downregulate some of that stress response, and hopefully
Yeah.
you can be in a better place. It does come back to, if I can maintain regulation, then the situation has a greater chance of being regulated and not, overflowing and be spilling into something that we later then have a lot of judgment around because we maybe don't feel like we were our best self.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Um, so we get hijacked, you know, more easily than we would like to think,
Sure.
and even with a lot of practice, it's pretty easy to hijack our emotions. Maybe we get better at coming back. Maybe we get better at noticing when it happens, which, you were saying at the very start, it's the kids don't even notice.
Yeah.
They don't have the awareness that, oh, my emotions were just completely hijacked. Look at me, I'm screaming. At least I can get to that insight. And our kids, they need us to be able to get back there. And so there's a certain gentleness, in our communication that maybe we can come to through our own work, you know,
Yeah.
as
And
you
I
as
mean,
you're saying. I mean, that's the big work is us.
I think too, I think it's really just to like double down on what you said, our ability to come back and maybe catch ourselves, or become aware of ourselves boiling or coming to a boil sooner. That's it. We are going to feel those feelings. We are going to experience that. And I always like to highlight that those experiences as normal, because I think once, if we strive for perfection, which I've dabbled in striving for perfection, um,
How'd that work for you?
it was perfect.
Yeah.
But once we, if you're just trying to stay calm and regulated and aware and work with what is, and then all these other things that are unpleasant arise, and then your reaction is strong, then beating yourself up isn't going to make it any better, and it's not going to make the experience better for the child in the scenario too. So sometimes we need to pause as well, and modeling that can, hey, I'm upset, I'm going to take 2 minutes to take some breaths, and then let's come back to this.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
But those are, and then once we can, and once we find that more centered space, that's where communication can happen. We can like try to name our feelings, try to name where we're at, but also again, really trying to ask questions so that it's not just a lecture, because we may we may think a child is in a space where they are comprehending, but we don't know unless they're articulating something that they understand.
Yeah, yeah. And they're not good at articulating when their emotions have been hijacked, right?
I
When
don't think I am either. So,
no, we're not.
yeah,
None of us have control have the capacity to be articulate if our prefrontal cortex has gone
gone.
away. We need to get it back. We need to get it back. And yeah. So then it's unfair to judge at that point, when it's not working, when it's not online. So, sort of this idea of working towards being able to be gentle and being able to be interested, as you're saying, with the asking questions. I mean, that's how we show interest, right?
Yep.
Yeah. What's it like when? Or, how did this, strike you? What happened here? All of those things are really showing how much we care. Yeah. So cool. Well, thanks for normalizing our feelings with for us and with us, and it's I've noticed how much we've been laughing
Yeah, trying to
about
see what.
ourselves, right? So I'm wondering if you have a word of wisdom for us or a single watchword for us that can, maybe help when we're thinking about how are we going to communicate with this kid right now.
I think it goes back to the guided piece, and another teacher that I had who may have been quoting someone else, but someone Elise Moss.
Mm,
She said in a meditation once, softening the body supports softening the mind. And I think if we can find those points of tension in the body and soften them, I think that we will go a long way towards being in a better place to communicate.
yeah. Softening the body leads to softening the mind. Okay. Great thought. And we just have to practice it.
That's it. It's practice.
Okay. And there's one more laugh. So we will try as best we can. Thanks so much, Kevin. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much.